Hi, I'm Callista. Have you ever been called a trespasser? In your own house? I stood there on the porch of the home my father left me, and my sister-in-law pointed at my face, screaming that I didn't belong. My brother? He laughed. The rest of them joined in, like I was some stranger ruining their perfect picture. But they didn't know what I had in my bag, or how quickly everything was about to change. Before we dive in, tell me, what time are you listening to this, and where from? Drop a comment. I read every one. My name is Callista Whitlock. I'm 34, the youngest of 3 siblings, and a property manager here in Savannah. I've always been the one to smooth things over, the one who lets things go for the sake of keeping the family together. When my father passed, his red brick house, the one with the creaking porch swing and the magnolia tree out front, was left to me. I didn't need to live there. I had my own place across town. But I thought it would be good for Evander, my older brother, and his wife Maribel to stay there. It was supposed to keep us close, or at least keep some part of my father alive. So I let them move in, rent-free, with no strings attached. At least, that's what I told myself at the time. The late summer heat clung to me as I parked in the driveway that evening, a box of old heirlooms in the passenger seat, my father's watch, some letters, things I thought should be back in the house where they belonged. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. It was supposed to be a small, quiet gesture. The sun was dipping low, painting the house in amber light, but something in my chest felt tight. This house had always been mine in name, but lately, it felt more like I was visiting strangers. I climbed the steps and knocked. Maribel opened the door, her hair perfectly done, a glass of wine in her hand. Her face twisted the second she saw me, like I'd tracked mud across a pristine floor. "What are you doing here?" she snapped, leaning her shoulder against the frame so I couldn't walk past. I held up the box. "I found some of Dad's things in storage. Thought I'd bring them by. Didn't think I needed an invitation." Her lips curled. "You can't just show up unannounced. This is our home. You can't barge in like a trespasser." The word stung. Trespasser. I blinked, trying to make sure I'd heard her right. "Maribel, this is my house," I said, my voice quieter than I wanted it to be. "Legally, my name is on the deed. You know that." She laughed without humor, stepping forward so we were inches apart. "Are you insane? This is my family's home now. Ours. You gave it to us when you let us live here." Her tone carried through the hallway. I saw Evander step into view behind her, leaning against the wall in his worn t-shirt, arms crossed. He didn't say a word, just watched. Like this wasn't his fight. Like he wasn't living in my house under my grace. "I didn't give it away," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I let you live here because I wanted to help." Maribel pointed at me, her fingers so close I could smell the tang of her perfume. "Help. Don't flatter yourself. You've done nothing for this family except make everything about you." My mouth went dry. Before I could answer, I heard laughter. Not just Evander's nervous chuckle, but another voice from deeper inside. Someone else had been listening, and they found this funny. My humiliation was their entertainment. The box in my hands suddenly felt heavier, like I was holding every ounce of disrespect they'd ever thrown my way. I glanced past Maribel into the house. The walls that once held my childhood, birthday banners, my father's laughter, the smell of Sunday dinners, felt alien, like I was standing outside a prison I'd been locked out of. "I came here to do something kind," I said softly, more to myself than to them. "And you've made it clear what you think of that." Maribel smirked. "Then leave the box and go. We don't need your drama." I stepped back, my grip tightening on the box. My hands were shaking, but I wouldn't let her see it. I took one last look at Evander. He didn't meet my eyes. Of course he didn't. I walked down the steps slowly, the boards groaning under my feet. The late summer air felt different now, thicker, suffocating. As I reached my car, I heard another laugh from inside, sharper this time. I closed my eyes and let the sound burn into me. They truly believed I had no place there. If they wanted to play this game, fine, but they had no idea what I was holding. In my bag, I had something they'd forgotten all about, the deed. I sat in my car for what felt like an eternity, the faint hum of cicadas filling the space between my shallow breaths. The streetlights along the block had just flickered on, casting long shadows across the driveway. My hands rested on my leather satchel, fingers tracing the worn edge of the flap, knowing exactly what sat inside. That piece of paper, the one my father handed me after the funeral, wasn't just proof of ownership. It was his trust in me, his last act of faith that I would protect what he had built. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes, replaying that moment like a home movie. My father's voice, gravelly yet soft, came back to me. "You're the one who'll protect this place, Callista." He'd said it like it was more than a house, like he was handing me the family itself. Back then, I thought letting Evander live here would honor that. My brother was struggling. His work came and went, and Maribel, well, she had a way of convincing everyone she deserved more than she had. I didn't need the house, I told myself. They did. And wasn't family about sacrifice? But tonight, staring at that red brick home through my windshield, I felt the full weight of how wrong I'd been. They hadn't just taken the space, they'd erased me from it. I cracked the window to breathe, and that's when I heard it. Her voice. Maribel, sharp and mocking, drifting through the open living room window like smoke. "She's too weak to fight back," she said. The words cut deeper than anything she'd hurled at me earlier. "She plays the victim because that's all she knows how to do." Laughter followed. My brother's laugh. That awkward, hollow sound he made when he wanted to keep the peace but didn't care enough to stop the fire from spreading. Others joined in, voices I couldn't place. How many of them were in there? My stomach twisted. I sat perfectly still, staring at my hands. They saw me as nothing, worse than nothing. A charity case they could ridicule in the house my father left to me. I'd been humiliated on the porch, and now they were turning my humiliation into their evening entertainment. My phone buzzed in my lap, yanking me back to myself. A text from Evander. "Hope you made it home." The audacity of it nearly made me laugh, as if we hadn't just stood on opposite sides of a battlefield, as if his silence hadn't been a choice. I opened a new message. "We need to talk. Tomorrow. No Maribel." My thumbs hovered over the send button. But after a moment, I backspaced until the words disappeared. What good would it do? A conversation wouldn't fix this. They didn't respect me. They didn't even see me. What I needed wasn't another talk. I needed a plan. I started the car, pulling out of the driveway with a calm I didn't quite recognize. The humidity stuck to me like a second skin as I drove home, headlights sweeping across familiar streets that felt different tonight. By the time I reached my apartment, the sun had fully set, and the air smelled faintly of rain. Inside, I placed the box of heirlooms on the dining table and set my satchel beside it. I moved slowly, deliberately, as if each step needed to be felt. When I finally pulled the deed out, I laid it flat on the table. The paper felt heavier than it had any right to, edges yellowed slightly from age, but still carrying the force of my father's intent. I stared at it for a long time, arms folded, my mind both quiet and loud. This was more than property. This was my father's legacy, and mine. They'd chosen to forget that, to rewrite me out of my own story. Well, if they wanted to pretend I didn't exist, I'd remind them just how real I am. But before going to war, I needed to know exactly what they'd taken from me. The next morning came slow, wrapped in that heavy Georgia heat that clings to you before you even step outside. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee growing cold beside me, as I pulled out a stack of old family photos and receipts I'd kept in a worn envelope. One by one, I laid them out across the table like evidence. My mother's Tiffany-style lamp. I could still see its warm glow in the corner of the living room. My father's navy medals, polished and displayed in a shadow box above the mantel, and the old mahogany dining set where decades of Sunday dinners had played out, complete with his laughter and my mother's sharp looks when anyone dared to bring up politics. I wrote each item down, my pen pressing harder with every word, until the letters cut grooves into the page. It wasn't just stuff. These were the pieces of our family's history, the artifacts that told us who we were. By mid-morning, I knew what I had to do. I drove back to the house, rehearsing a line in my head, just here to pick up some personal items. A simple excuse, something Maribel couldn't object to without making herself look petty. When I arrived, the house felt different, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. Maribel wasn't there, thankfully. Evander opened the door, his face drawn and tired. "Callista," he said, half surprised, half wary. "I need to grab some things Dad left for me," I said, keeping my tone even. "It won't take long." He stepped aside without protest, though his eyes stayed on the floor. Inside, I moved carefully, scanning every room. It didn't take long to notice what was missing. The lamp, gone. The medals, nowhere in sight. The dining set, replaced by some bland modern table that looked like it had come from a clearance warehouse. My chest tightened. "Evander," I said quietly, my hand gripping the back of a chair that wasn't ours. "Where are Mom's things? Dad's medals? The lamp?" He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. "Maribel said those old things didn't match the house anymore," he muttered, voice thin. Didn't match the house. As if history had to coordinate with her decor. I swallowed the rage building in my throat and forced my hands to stay still. "So, where are they now?" I asked. He didn't answer. His silence told me everything I needed to know. I excused myself to grab a few things from the back. Instead, I walked to the den and pulled out my phone, fingers moving with a steadiness I didn't feel. Within minutes of searching online, there they were. My mother's lamp, my father's medals, even the dining set, listed for sale under Maribel's name. Price tags dangling off memories like they were garage sale junk. I took photos of every listing, my pulse steadying with each click of the camera. Standing in the house that used to be my safe place, I felt something inside me shift. They hadn't just taken my belongings. They'd stripped the house of its soul, gutted the meaning out of the walls, and tried to profit off it. I pictured my father's face, what he would have said if he knew his legacy was being hawked online like cheap goods. It made me sick. I didn't confront Evander. Not yet. Instead, I walked out with the same quiet I'd entered with, my bag heavier with the proof I'd gathered. My grief, once soft and paralyzing, hardened into something sharper. If they thought I was powerless, they were about to learn who really held the strings. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. The air felt heavy in my apartment, the kind of stillness that comes after a storm, except the storm hadn't ended. It was just waiting. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, stripes of gold cutting across the floor. But it didn't bring me any peace. My coffee sat untouched on the counter as I pulled out a notepad and started writing down everything I could remember that still belonged to me in that house. The list grew faster than I expected. My mother's Tiffany-style lamp, the one that sat in the front window for as long as I could remember. My father's Navy medals, polished every Memorial Day and displayed in a shadow box in his study. The dining room set where we'd carved turkeys, sung Happy Birthday, and had every Whitlock family argument worth remembering. And so much more. I could see each piece clearly in my mind, frozen in time, like I had walked out one day and left my whole family history behind. Except I hadn't. I had trusted them with it. And that trust was beginning to feel like the biggest mistake of my life. By mid-morning, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to sit here wondering. I grabbed my keys, my satchel, and drove back to the house. When I pulled up, the driveway was empty. I told myself it was a blessing. No audience. I could do what I needed without another performance from Maribel. But the moment I stepped onto the porch, I felt like I was trespassing on my own property. That word, trespasser, still rang in my ears from the night before. I knocked, half hoping no one would answer. Evander finally came to the door, looking like he'd just rolled out of bed. "Callista," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "What are you doing here?" "I need to pick up some personal items," I replied evenly, my tone polite but clipped. He hesitated, then stepped aside. "Sure, go ahead." The house smelled different, not like home. Too much artificial vanilla, too little of the faint mix of lemon polish and my father's old aftershave. I moved through each room slowly, like I was walking through a museum someone had rearranged without permission. In the living room, the Tiffany lamp was gone. My heart thumped. In my father's study, the shadow box that held his medals, missing. And when I stepped into the dining room, I froze. The table, our table, the one that had been with us since I was a kid, was gone. In its place sat a sleek, soulless set that looked like it came from a catalog. My voice came out sharper than I intended. "Where's the dining set? And Mom's lamp? Dad's medals?" Evander was leaning against the doorframe, avoiding my eyes. "Maribel said those old things didn't match the house anymore," he muttered, as if that explained anything. "Didn't match?" I repeated. "Those weren't decorations, Evander. They were our parents' lives, their history." He shifted uncomfortably. "Look, she thought—" "Maribel thought?" I cut him off. "Do you ever think for yourself anymore?" He didn't answer, just stared at the floor. Fingers itched to grab my phone. I needed proof. And that's when the idea hit me. I stepped into the kitchen, out of his view, and quietly pulled up a resale site on my phone. It didn't take long. Maribel wasn't even subtle about it. Her profile was public, her name right there, next to photos of my family's belongings. My mother's lamp, listed as vintage stained glass light. My father's medals described as collectible military memorabilia. Even the dining set, complete with a smug caption about its timeless charm. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. They hadn't just redecorated. They'd sold pieces of my family, pieces of me, to strangers for cash. I swallowed hard, forcing the tears back. I didn't cry in front of Evander. Not now. Instead, I took photo after photo of the listings, documenting everything. I wanted to scream, but I stayed silent. Quiet was my weapon now. Evander mumbled something about needing to get ready for work, like that excused the conversation we weren't having. I nodded, pretending to let him off the hook, but my mind was already somewhere else. I walked out with my phone full of evidence, my chest full of grief, and something else burning under it. Fury, hot and steady. They had humiliated me. They had gutted my father's house, and they thought I would do nothing. But grief is a funny thing. It either breaks you, or it hardens into something unshakable. As I drove home, I knew which side I was on. And the first string I pulled was one they never expected. The law. By the time I left my apartment that morning, the humidity was already clinging to me like a second skin. The short drive downtown felt longer than usual, every red light stretching my thoughts tighter and tighter. I parked in front of a small law office tucked between a coffee shop and a thrift store. The brass plaque on the door still had the same name I remembered from my childhood, Margot Hensley, attorney at law. Margot had been my parents' friend for decades. She'd been at our Thanksgiving table more than once, the kind of steady presence you forget to appreciate until you need her. And today, I needed her. Inside, the office smelled faintly of paper and peppermint tea. Margot walked out from behind a frosted glass door, her silver hair pulled back in a bun, glasses perched on the edge of her nose. "Callista Whitlock," she said, a mixture of surprise and concern in her voice. "It's been a long time." "Too long," I admitted. "I wish I was here for better reasons." Her expression softened. "Come on in. Let's talk." I handed her the folder I'd carried like a shield all morning. The deed, my father's signature still neat and strong at the bottom. I need to know what rights I actually have. They're acting like I don't exist. She skimmed the pages carefully, humming softly. Then she looked up. Legally, you own the house outright. This isn't in dispute. They have no claim to it unless you willingly give them one, in writing. The words hit me like cool water on a burn. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. Margot continued, if they've sold items without your permission, that's unauthorized disposal of property. You'll want to document everything. What's missing, what's been sold, and by whom. Screenshots, receipts, all of it. And if they harass you or try to intimidate you, keep records of that too. I nodded, my pen already scribbling notes. So, I'm not helpless here. Not even close, she said firmly. But you'll need to decide how far you want to push this. Are you looking to kick them out or just rein them in? Her words lingered. I didn't answer immediately because I wasn't entirely sure yet. We spent another hour going through options. By the time I left, I had a list of action items and one official-looking letter that would be my first move. By late afternoon, I was back at my kitchen table, rereading the cease and desist notice Margot had drafted. It demanded that Maribel immediately stop selling any family property and provide a full inventory of what was left in the house. It wasn't aggressive, just firm. But firm was enough for now. I signed it and sent it off, a weight lifting slightly off my chest as I sealed the envelope. That night, my phone rang. Evander. I hesitated before answering, bracing myself for whatever version of him I was about to get. My little brother, who used to follow me around the yard, or the man who had stood silently while his wife humiliated me. Callista, what the hell is this? His voice cracked, the panic barely hidden. Hello to you too, I said, my tone measured. This letter, from Margot. Maribel says you're trying to kick us out. I'm not, I replied evenly. But you let her sell pieces of our family like they were junk at a yard sale. That ends now. In the background, I heard her voice, sharp, cutting through the line. Tell her she's lost her mind. This is our home. Evander lowered his voice like he didn't want her to hear. Why are you doing this? We're family. That's exactly why, I said quietly. Because family doesn't gut a house for profit. Family doesn't erase someone who's kept them afloat. You've crossed lines, Evander. And if you keep letting her do this, you'll lose more than furniture. You'll lose me as your sister. Silence. For a moment, I thought he might fight back, argue, try to convince me I was wrong. Instead, I heard only his breathing and the faint muffled sound of Maribel yelling something I couldn't make out. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat. I need to go. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, the dial tone replaced by the hum of my refrigerator in the next room. His silence told me everything. Maribel had her claws deeper than I thought. But I wasn't ready for how far she'd go to keep control. By the next evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was slipping further from me, not physically, but in spirit. The storm clouds rolling in mirrored what I felt brewing inside. I didn't call ahead or text anyone. I just drove, my hands clamped tight on the steering wheel, headlights cutting through the dimming light. The house looked different, even from the curb. The rose bushes my mother planted decades ago had been ripped out, replaced with neat, soulless shrubs. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was Maribel's project, and I was the uninvited ghost lingering outside. I let myself in with my key, my heart hammering as I stepped through the doorway. It smelled like a furniture store, synthetic, polished, sterile. My eyes darted around. Gone were the family photos that once lined the hallway, the quilt my mother made, the one that had always hung in the den, replaced by some generic framed art. Even the dining set, our dining set, was missing. It felt like walking into a stranger's home, yet I knew every nail in these walls. I headed toward my old room, hoping maybe some trace of us remained there, but even that had been gutted. The dresser my father built by hand was gone. The bookshelf I'd filled as a teenager had been replaced with a modern desk and a computer monitor. Every remnant of us had been erased. I walked back toward the door, my breath coming shallow, my thoughts racing. I needed to get out before I said something I couldn't take back. That's when I heard her voice. "Planning to take inventory, Callista?" Maribel's tone dripped with sarcasm as she stood in the driveway, arms crossed, her hair pulled back too tightly. Or maybe just steal what's left. I stopped at the threshold. "I came to check on the house," I said evenly, though my voice wavered. She stepped closer, deliberately loud, her voice echoing for the neighbors who were surely listening. "You don't live here anymore. Maybe it's time you accepted that. You're just a bitter, lonely woman who can't let go of the past." The words hit me like a slap. Before I could reply, Evander emerged from the garage, his hands shoved in his pockets, eyes avoiding mine. For a moment, I thought he might step in, shield me like the little brother who used to cling to my side. Instead, he sighed. "Maybe it's time you stopped coming around, Callista." The air left my lungs. I stared at him, unable to process the betrayal. "You're siding with her?" I asked, my voice breaking despite my effort to stay composed. He didn't answer, just shifted his weight uncomfortably and kept his gaze fixed on the ground. It was then I understood. Maribel hadn't just moved into my house. She'd moved into his head. I turned and walked to my car without another word. My legs felt like lead, but somehow I made it to the driver's seat, slammed the door shut, and just sat there. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely fit the key in the ignition. On the drive back, I cried in a way I hadn't in years, messy, heaving sobs that blurred the road and made me pull over twice just to catch my breath. By the time I reached my apartment, I couldn't bring myself to go inside right away. I stayed in the car for an hour, staring at the steering wheel, feeling like an intruder in my own family, like Maribel's words had branded themselves into me. When I finally went inside, the silence felt heavier than the storm that had started pounding outside. I opened the closet, pulled down boxes of old family photos, and stacked them on the table. I couldn't look at them. Not yet. I wasn't sure if I wanted to. That night, sleep didn't come. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying her words over and over. For the first time in my life, I almost believed Maribel. Maybe I didn't belong anywhere. But then I found the one thing she couldn't erase. The truth. It was late, rain pattering against the windows as I sat in my apartment, staring at the boxes of old family photos I'd pulled out the night before. I hadn't touched them yet. They felt like landmines, each one ready to blow up whatever resolve I had left. My phone buzzed, startling me out of my thoughts. "Hi, honey," came a familiar voice. Mrs. Holcomb, our old neighbor who'd lived across the street from my parents for as long as I could remember. Her voice had that warm, nosy lady lilt that always made me feel like I was back on that block as a kid. "I wasn't sure if I should call you," she continued, "but I saw Maribel last night. She was loading up boxes into that fancy SUV of hers. Real late, too. That didn't sit right with me. Callista, she's been moving things out." Her words hit me like a shot of cold water. I gripped the phone tighter. "You're sure? Sure as I am that those weren't her things." I thanked her, my mind already racing. As soon as we hung up, I paced the apartment, heart pounding. If Maribel had been sneaking things out, she wasn't just redecorating, she was hiding them. The dining set, the quilt, my father's medals. It all made sense. Within the hour, I was back in my car, rain streaking across the windshield, tires hissing against the wet pavement. The closer I got to their side of town, the heavier my chest felt. I'd been avoiding this, trying to reason with Evander, trying to play fair. But fair doesn't work with someone like Maribel. I parked a block away and sat in the dark car, phone in hand, scrolling through public records and storage facility listings. It didn't take long. There it was. A unit rented under a name I recognized but hadn't expected. M. James, her maiden name. I drove over, my heart thudding with each turn. The facility was quiet, just a single flickering light by the office door. The manager, a tired-looking man in his 60s, barely glanced at me when I explained who I was and why I needed to check the unit. A little polite insistence and a copy of the deed in my name was all it took for him to shrug and let me in. The moment the metal door rattled upward, the smell of dust and old fabric hit me. I stepped inside and froze. There it all was. My mother's Tiffany-style lamp sat wedged between a stack of plastic bins. The quilt she'd spent months hand-stitching for me was crumpled in a corner, half covered by a box of kitchen gadgets. My father's military medals, his folded flag, tossed carelessly into an open cardboard box, like junk meant for a yard sale. My breath caught. I knelt by the box, my fingers trembling as I picked up the flag, running my hand over its creases. For a second, I was 10 years old again, watching my father fold it himself, showing me how to treat it with respect. And now here it was, discarded like trash. This wasn't just theft, this was erasure. She hadn't just wanted my house, she wanted my family gone. I stood in that storage unit for a long time, rain tapping faintly on the metal roof above. Then, slowly, I pulled out my phone. I took photos. Everything, every box, every item, time-stamped and cataloged. I documented the unit number, the access logs, every detail that would tie this back to her. No more pleading, no more hoping Evander would wake up and see what she was doing. This wasn't about family anymore. This was about justice. By the time I stepped back into the rain, locking the unit behind me, my grief had transformed into something sharp, something useful. I whispered to the night, my voice steadier than it had been in weeks. You wanted a fight, Maribel? Now you've got one. Tomorrow, I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to bring the law with me. But first, I had to make sure she couldn't twist the story one more time. That morning, I woke up earlier than I had in weeks. I made coffee, sat at my small kitchen table, and spread out every single piece of evidence I'd gathered. The deed was front and center, proof that the house was legally mine. Next to it were the photos I'd taken in that storage unit, time-stamped and cataloged. Screenshots of Maribel's online sales listings sat in a neat folder alongside the written statement from Mrs. Holcomb about what she saw that night. As I organized everything, a strange calm washed over me. This wasn't just about feelings anymore. It was about facts, undeniable and unshakable. Maribel had built her little empire on lies and manipulation, but I finally had the receipts. Literally. By mid-morning, I was walking into a quiet coffee shop downtown, a leather binder tucked under my arm. My attorney, Sharon, was already there waiting for me, dressed in her usual crisp blazer, glasses perched at the edge of her nose. She'd been a friend of my father's once, the kind of woman who didn't waste words, and I needed that. We spent over an hour going over everything. Legally, you're in the strongest position here, she said, flipping through the pages. The house is yours. She has no claim. And those items, if you can prove she took them, which you can, that's theft. You're not just protecting yourself, you're protecting your family's legacy. Her words steadied me. If she calls the cops again? I asked. She smirked. Let her. This time you'll be ready. In fact, I encourage it. It was such a simple statement, but it felt like a turning point. For weeks, I'd been reacting to Maribel, letting her control the narrative. Now, I was building my own. On my way out, I stopped near the counter to grab another coffee, and that's when I saw her. A young woman, probably no older than 25, standing by the door, with a man who had his hand clamped tightly around her wrist. He was leaning close, hissing something I couldn't make out, while she kept her head down, nodding quickly. For a moment, I couldn't move. It was like looking at myself years ago, staying quiet, avoiding conflict, convincing myself that silence kept the peace. I wanted to tell her to leave him, to stand up, to not waste years shrinking herself for someone else's comfort. Instead, I just met her eyes as she glanced up briefly. It was enough. I hoped she saw in my stare that she didn't deserve whatever was being said to her. Walking back to my car, I realized that's what this fight was about for me. I'd been letting Maribel bully me into a corner, taking piece after piece of my life, while I told myself that staying calm was the mature thing to do. But maturity doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. By the time I got home, Sharon had already emailed me the first draft of a formal notice. It was blunt and to the point. Any further removal of property would result in immediate police involvement and civil charges. Just reading it felt like a shift in the air, like I'd reclaimed a part of myself I didn't know I'd lost. I spent the rest of the afternoon rehearsing what I would say to Maribel. Not angry outbursts or emotional pleas, just the truth, firm and unwavering. You don't own this house. You don't own my family's history. And this ends now. I practiced until my voice didn't shake anymore, until I could say it with the same cold steadiness Sharon had in her voice when she spoke about the law. When the sun dipped low and the apartment grew quiet, I sat at the kitchen table again, binder closed, hands folded on top of it. Tomorrow, I was walking back into that house. But I wouldn't be walking in alone. And when I arrived, I wasn't the only one waiting. The police were already there. The sight of their cruiser parked at the curb sent a jolt through me. My grip on the binder tightened, my heartbeat sinking with the hum of the engine that hadn't yet been turned off. This wasn't just another visit. This was the line in the sand. I stepped out of my car, the humid Georgia air clinging to my skin, and walked toward the front porch. Before I could even knock, the door burst open. You again? Maribel's voice was sharp enough to slice through the heavy air. She came storming out in a whirlwind of perfume and rage, planting herself between me and the officers. You're trespassing. I told you, you're not welcome here. Her arms flailed as she spoke, her tone dripping with the same false authority she'd used that first day in the doorway. Evander followed behind her, his expression strained, like a man caught between two storms. He couldn't look me in the eye. Officer, Maribel barked, gesturing toward me. I want her arrested. This is my family's home. She's insane. You need to get her off my property. The words hit me like they always did, a gut punch wrapped in insult, but I didn't flinch this time. My fingers didn't tremble. My breathing stayed even. Ma'am, one of the officers started, but I interrupted gently. Actually, officer, I think this will make things clear. I stepped forward and handed him the binder. He opened it, flipping through the neatly organized documents. The deed with my name in bold, my mother's will, and Sharon's formal notice. His eyes scanned the pages, his brow furrowing as the pieces came together. Maribel kept ranting, her voice rising with each word. Don't listen to her! She's been harassing us for weeks. This is our house. I've been taking care of this place. She's... The officer held up a hand. Ma'am, he said, his tone shifting to one of calm authority. Legally, this property belongs to her. You and your husband are guests here. Guests, not owners. The silence that followed was deafening. Evander's face drained of color. He finally looked at me, his lips parting as if he'd just been slapped awake. You own the house? His voice was barely above a whisper, heavy with disbelief. Yes, I said simply. I always have. Maribel's sputtering turned into incoherent excuses, her words collapsing under their own weight. Well, I thought, that's not what he said. But no one was listening anymore. From the doorway, other family members had gathered, faces I'd known my whole life, now pale and quiet. They weren't laughing anymore. They weren't smirking. They were just still. This is over, I said, my voice steady but loud enough for everyone to hear. You will not erase my family again. You will not sell off what doesn't belong to you. This house, these memories, this legacy, they are mine to protect. For once, Maribel had nothing to say. The officer closed the binder, and handed it back to me. "We're here to keep the peace," he said. "But legally, she's right. Any further issues? Call us immediately." I nodded, my eyes never leaving Maribel's. "I will." I turned and walked back to my car. The weight on my chest felt lighter, but I knew it wasn't gone. As I gripped the steering wheel, I glanced back at the house one last time. But as I drove away, one thought wouldn't leave me. Maribel wasn't finished. People like her never walk away quietly. It's right. But this time, I was ready for her. 3 days later, I sat across from Sharon in her office, the same binder of evidence between us. "She filed a harassment claim," Sharon said, shaking her head. "And she's contesting ownership of the house. She's desperate." My jaw clenched, but my voice was calm. "Can she even do that?" "She can file whatever she wants," Sharon replied, sliding a stack of papers toward me. "But she can't win. The deed, your mother's will, the inventory of stolen property. It all dismantles her claim." It took everything in me not to laugh at the irony. Maribel had tried to erase me from my own home, and now she was standing in front of a judge, acting like I was the intruder. But the difference this time was simple. I had proof. When we walked into the courtroom later that week, she was already there, sitting next to Evander with a smug tilt to her chin. She didn't meet my eyes. Maybe she couldn't. The judge read through the documents slowly, flipping pages with deliberate care. He glanced up at Maribel only once, his gaze sharp. "Ma'am," he said, "your claim is baseless. This property is legally and fully owned by Ms. Whitlock. Furthermore, you are ordered to return all items unlawfully removed from the premises within 10 days. Any further interference will result in criminal charges." The words hung in the air like a verdict on more than just property. Maribel's mouth opened, ready to argue, but no sound came out. Evander shifted in his seat, his face pale. He wouldn't even look at her. When the gavel came down, it felt like a door slamming shut, one I'd been holding open far too long. Later that evening, I walked through the front door of the house, my house, with Sharon by my side and a locksmith finishing up the last of the new locks. The air smelled like furniture polish and old wood. Boxes of my family's belongings lined the hallway, returned from storage. I opened one carefully, my fingers brushing against the folded American flag that had sat on my father's mantel for decades. I found my mother's quilt next, the stitching familiar under my hands. It wasn't just fabric anymore. It was a reminder that some things, no matter how hard others try, cannot be erased. One by one, I restored the house. The Tiffany-style lamp glowed softly in the corner of the living room. My parents' photo albums went back onto the bookshelf, their spines lined up like sentinels. I hung a single framed photo of my parents by the front door, a silent declaration of who had built this place and who had the right to protect it. By late afternoon, I sat on the porch with a glass of sweet tea, the sunlight soft against my face. For the first time in weeks, I breathed without the weight pressing down on my chest. This was more than a house. This was my family's legacy, and I'd taken it back. Evander came by just before sunset, his steps hesitant. He looked older, smaller somehow. "Can I sit?" he asked. I nodded. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice breaking. "I let her twist everything. I didn't see it until all of this. I don't know if you can forgive me." I stared at the horizon for a long moment before answering. "I don't know if I can yet, but I can tell you this. This house is mine. My boundaries are non-negotiable. If you want to be part of my life, you'll have to respect that." He nodded, tears welling in his eyes, and for once, he didn't try to argue. As he left, I draped my mother's quilt across the banister. My hand lingered there, feeling every stitch. It wasn't just a quilt anymore. It was victory. Sometimes you don't fight to win. You fight so they can't erase you.